Hello and welcome to the show. For today's FailRace versus the community, we were having a 90s Japanese car showdown up into A-class, so relatively fast, these vehicles, in an opening race at the Sonoma full circuit. I had opted to go for an SM300 ZX, a car I like very much. Haven't tended to drive them a huge amount on Forza 6. Turned out to be actually a really rather good car. There was, unfortunately, one poor Supra came off the worst of some slight concertina effect further back, taking a trip across the grass. Otherwise, everyone else making it through nice and cleanly. The Silvia on the outside of me couldn't get stopped. Such an easy place to push it that little bit too hard under braking and go for a little bit of an explore. That would make my life relatively straightforward to move up a position. Immediately on the attack against a Supra, the Toyota, I wasn't quite going to be able to get around the outside of. A little bit too fast through the corner for me, however, gets a huge slide on the exit, and that's an easy opportunity for my 300. My Nissan was massively quick in a straight line, able to dive up the inside of the Skyline. The door's a little bit ajar for the Civic to follow through. I'd move up into fourth. The Civic keen to follow my progress. At the front, an MX-5 would move up into the lead ahead of a Galant. Further back, and the Silvia was keen to try and recover some lost ground from that early off-track excursion against a Mazda RX-7. The RX-7 running a little bit wide through that corner. The Silvia could dive to the inside. Now, we have seen, while this final turn is a great overtaking spot here at Sonoma, you can sometimes get away. If you run a little bit wide on the way into the corner, you can get away with getting a very, very good drive off of the turn. The RX-7 actually gets a fantastic run down towards the start-finish straight. The problem is, Silvia's too quick. The Silvia very, very fast in a straight line and was able to find a way past. You tend to build your car, though, to be fast in a straight line. You'll often compromise in terms of handling, and sure enough, the grey Nissan struggling a little bit through that opening corner. Does a good job fighting the RX-7 off, helped perhaps a little bit by a Supra up ahead being in the way, but the Mazda gets himself to the inside for the run into the next corner. Nissan going for a cutback, though, this time not going off the trip across the grass. Does go for the cutback on the RX-7, gets his vehicle positioned nicely. However, it is going to be on the outside for the next turn. The acceleration of the Nissan is, very, very helpful. However, at the end of the day, just couldn't quite get it into the right place, and the RX-7 would be through, although they would continue the scrap on a little bit towards the front, and the MX-5 in the lead was pulling away from the rest of the field. We had caught up quite quickly to the Galant and were keen to try and find a way past it. It was quite a train of cars that was starting to form behind this Mitsubishi. Thankfully for me, the Galant carries a bit too much speed into that penultimate corner. The NSX does a little bit as well. It's a notoriously easy place to run that bit too wide when you're pushing the car hard, and in doing so, the Galant left the door open for that Evo 6 to have a sniff up the inside out of the final turn. The Evo 6 will get the place as well. That's 2 places gone in just one relatively small mistake. Certainly easily done when the field is as close as this. Now, as we often see when we run the higher classes of car, the field did get spread out quite quickly, although we did come across quite a lot of sort of pairs of cars that would be engaged in battle, and often engaged in battle for large portions of the race. Another all-Mitsubishi battle, as the Eclipse was busy trying to fend off the Evo 6. The Evo 6 goes from a fair way back to try and get to that inside, and just about get himself to the door. It's all about who has a better drive out of this. It's a weird corner, sort of a square corner that we have going on, and it would actually prove to be by far the most popular overtaking spot of the race. The Evo 6 managed to get the pass done briefly with a big slide through the S's, but the Eclipse was not quite done yet. Is they going to go side by side? Not quite. The Evo deciding the better option through there would be to duck into line. Actually does manage to get himself then to the inside down towards this final corner. Eclipse giving plenty of space. As I said, though, that wider line, if you can get a good run off the corner, you can sometimes get a fantastic launch. Wouldn't quite work out for the Eclipse in terms of getting the place back right that second, but was still very close behind. I would have some issue with a curb, getting my car very, very sideways. Managed to save it from a huge accident, but dropped back behind the Evo and NSX. The Honda, very, very fast, as perhaps not particularly surprising. I know how good A-Class NSX is can be. And yeah, this one was incredibly quick, putting on a lot of pressure to the Evo. In the end, the Mitsubishi just not quite able to get stopped into the square corner, running a little bit wider. A fantastic cutback from the NSX would put him up a position. Then we go into this fast flowing section where the Honda was really very, very quick indeed. Further back, the RX-7, it was in our little battle at the front, made a mistake and dropped himself down through the order, was trying to recover some of the positions. He was coming up against a Toyota MR2. You can kind of see, though, that there were, fairly large gaps going on in the field. The Mazda gets a good run out onto this relatively short straight. It's pretty much a carbon copy of the NSX's pass. This time, the MR2 a little bit locked on the brakes, couldn't quite get the car stopped, ends up skidding its way through the turn. It is another almost textbook cutback from the RX-7 there to make up a position. Another duo that would be battling for a fair portion of the race. Sylvia against Eclipse, as they would be running through these opening corners on the lap. We'd seen the Sylvia have a good battle with the RX-7, certainly had plenty of straight line speed, was much more of a handful through these corners. The Eclipse gets to the inside. It is a very, very long corner, and if you can get your car to the inside there, you can make up some decent time. It's a good place to get passes done, but then there's that straight line speed of the Nissan down towards the next corner, though can't get it stopped, and we see yet another cutback around that particular turn. The Eclipse able to get his vehicle ahead, but it's got to try and defend. It is very difficult to get a pass done through the S's here. This is a really single file unless you are incredibly brave and probably a bit stupid, because yeah, it is so fast through, especially up in something like A-class cars. It is so incredibly quick through there, bumpy, easy to make mistakes. The Eclipse runs through the penultimate corner, is a little bit wide, just not quite the perfect line through there, and the Sylvia has got the speed to have a big dive up the inside into the final turn, and it would be the Sylvia that would get the position back as they run off towards that. It's not quite the final turn, I guess, technically, because that's sort of, I don't know, I don't know, it's a, yeah, I don't know whether I'd count that as sort of the kink on the straight. It's not really something you have to worry about too much with the cars. But anyway, never mind, I've been calling them slightly wrong. Don't really care. For me, I was up in the third position. The Evo 6 was coming strong towards the end of the race. I was having to try my very best to fend off. I had, massive amounts of straight line speed, but was struggling through some of the tighter corners, and sure enough, couldn't get my Nissan quite turned in, and it was another, about 4 or 5 sort of cutbacks we've seen at that particular corner. It's a massively popular place to get overtakes done around this race. I had, the straight line speed, but then we got to these fast corners, and then things all got a little bit scary in the Nissan, so I did have to back off a tad at the front, and it would be the MX-5 that will go on to claim a victory here, having got the lead early on. Was, I think, being caught ever so slightly by the NSX towards the end of the race. In fact, a few cars were having some issues with tyre wear. I think the MX-5 has really killed its tyres around this circuit, so a couple of laps longer, and it might have been in some serious trouble with tyres. My Nissan hadn't had any problems, but yeah, there were a few cars as well that had got some serious tyre wear problems, but a solid victory for the MX-5. On to our second race that would head to the Road Atlanta full circuit. Now, with this particular category of cars, there was a mixture of people going with mostly rear-wheel drive, although there were some all-wheel drive, even occasional brave front-wheel drive cars in the mix. Naturally, the all-wheel drive cars like the Subaru SVX get an absolutely fantastic start here, but you could get in trouble and get a little bit boxed in when it is relatively far down the order. Everyone makes it through the top of the hill quite cleanly. Unfortunately, some lag would murder an MR2 and a Mitsubishi GTO into the tyre bundle. There's not a huge amount that can be done. Sadly, it's one of the challenges, shall we say, when it comes to online racing. This Supra getting very brave. In fact, there was 3 wide further back as well through that incredibly quick corner. The SVX, much straight line speed, but not really able to use very much of it at this early stage. There's just simply too many cars around at this moment in time. That can often be one of the difficulties. You've got a quick car and you start further down the order. The grids are on complete random, so you never know where you're going to start. Yeah, you could easily get boxed in this early part. The 22B was seriously struggling for straight line speed. The Supra wasn't massively fast, as the SVX would come flying past. So, yeah, the very, very long back straights down here would be helpful for some of the higher speed cars. Now, this red Supra got himself in trouble, actually, across the top of the hill. Got a big slide, and that would open the floodgates. So we've seen this time and time again. When early in the race, when you've got a big pack of cars behind you, one sort of mistake, one little bit wide out of a corner even, can leave you exposed to being attacked from just about everyone. The Supra getting passed by the CRX, then the Prelude, then takes a little bit of a wonky line trying to fight back against the Prelude, doesn't get the move done. The Skyline would then come soaring past up the inside into that final, or the final corner before the straight. The RX-7 then got better straight line speed than the Toyota. He would make up a position as well as they head down towards the chicane. Yeah, getting out of position can cost you a surprising amount. The Subaru SVX was actually coming under a bit of pressure from a Toyota Celica. Two cars that I can never build a good one of. Never managed to build a good SVX, never managed to build a good Celica. I tried to build a Celica GT4, in fact this exact model of GT4 for this race. I just couldn't get the damn thing to be anywhere near competitive. The SVX with plenty of the straight line speed, but as you can see was not able to carry that speed through the corner. The Celica, very, very fast, would get himself to the inside. The Supra was carrying mega corner speed. He too would get a pass done on that Subaru, but then they were both sitting ducks when it came to this very, very long back straight, as the Subaru would, well, easily come soaring back past the Supra. The Celica put up a little bit more of a fight, but wasn't really enough to do much about that SVX. Again, you can see how further up the order things are very, very quickly getting spread out. Now, one of the vehicles that was making progress through the field got turned around at some point. This Skyline was, yeah, a massively quick car around this circuit as we head down towards the chicane here. The Supra goes defensive, making the Skyline work hard for the position, but the Nissan more than capable of carrying that speed around the outside of the opening part of the chicane. That'll put you inside for the second part, and the Supra just not able to quite live with the pace of that R32 as they round the final corner and across the line onto the next lap. The Supra close at this moment in time, but didn't really have any answer to fight with that Skyline. Now ahead of them, and the battle for third was on between a Supra and a Celica, and they'd been fighting each other so much that it actually drawn the Skyline and the Supra up towards them, with the black and red Supra around the outside of the Celica there, both going incredibly slowly because of the fighting, and the Skyline's going to get the pair of them into a single corner. One of the dangers, you end up fighting each other too much, and yeah, you can cost yourself huge amounts of time. You can just about see second place in the distance going down the long straight as a purple RX-7, long way ahead of this scrap. The Skyline up into that third place. The black Supra up ahead, half decent straight line speed in that car. The Celica that we are following at the moment coming under pressure from the Supra, fairly evenly matched in terms of straight line speed down this back straight. All about who's bravest on the brakes into the chicane. The Supra's turn now to try around the outside through the first part, the inside in the second part. Celica trying his best to stick with him, but not able to do it, just did not have the grip, and in running wide, in pushing his luck a little bit too much, that allowed a Nissan to sneak past as well. Yeah, don't want to be ending up out in the grass. Easily done when you're on the outside there, where you're trying to hold on to a position, but yeah, not a place that you want to find yourself out in. By far the most exciting stuff was going on around the white Supra, in all honesty. Yeah, once more, the rest of the field relatively spread out with these cars. It is the Nissan to the inside, down into the chicane. Supra once more trying to make that move around the outside work. He does hold it there, but the Nissan's got more speed than the previous cars, and then would be able to, I guess, the acceleration off the chicane really needed. The climb up the hill is fast enough to fend off that, as Supra's a big slide from the Toyota. At the front of the race, it was a relatively boring affair for me in the 300ZX. I got to the lead on the first lap and drove away from the rest of the field. I actually didn't drive great. I made a couple of silly mistakes. I could have had an even larger margin of victory, in all honesty. Yeah, this Nissan was a blooming good car around this circuit. It's plenty of straight line speed for the long straights, but it wasn't too much of a handful through the corners. So yeah, it was a quick car. Although the Skyline in third did set a faster lap than me. On to our third and final race. We would head to the Nürburgring GP circuit. The two Skylines managing to almost get into trouble before we even made it down to this first corner. Someone on the outside not quite able to get stopped into the opening turn. It was an R34 Skyline that would lead the way. The Fast and Furious Skyline, difficult car to build, the Fast and Furious one. It starts off about 2 PI away from the top of A-Class, so not much that you can do with that vehicle. It's making life briefly difficult for the NSX. The NSX had to try and go around the outside of one corner. In the end, though, the Honda, they are just so good. They are so good through the corners that the Skyline doesn't have anything really left to fight it. The Nissan thinking about having a go at the inside, but yeah, simply hasn't got the grip to fight the NSX. There's another NSX in third. He was quickly on the case trying to find a way past MX-5 up into fourth. Once more, we saw a very, very similar tale of the field spreading out very quickly. A couple of mistakes, a couple of incidents, and yeah, it was quite an open race early on. This the only other 300ZX to race in this event would move himself up into fourth place. Fairly straightforward by out-dragging the Evo 6 down that main start-finish straight. Again, a couple of relatively long straights around here for the higher top speed cars to enjoy, but there are a lot of corners. There are a lot of corners, a lot of technical sections around this Nürburgring circuit. I was down the order and fighting with a Skyline and RX-7 Toyota MR2. There's something that's got exploring off across the gravel as we head down towards the hairpin. The straight line speed of my Nissan would be enough to propel it up the inside. It was a big dive. It came from a long way back in the 300ZX, but it was going to be enough to get past the MR2. Took a little bit of an explore on the gravel, and now the Skyline's coming under increasing threat from that RX-7. Everything's wiggling their way up the top of the hill. I think there's an Eclipse going around the outside of an MR2 in the background. Well done if you got that pass done, because that uphill sort of S corner is a horribly nasty one to try and get passes done. Indeed, he did. The RX-7 had a go up the inside of the Skyline, didn't make the move stick, ended up skating out the other side. A good cutback from the Skyline to hold on to the position, and the Nissan would get the run down this back straight to the inside of a Supra and make up that place. The RX-7 keen to find a way past the Toyota as well. The blue Evo 6 was gradually losing a little bit of time to the cars ahead, falling back slightly through the order, coming under fire from the RX-7. The Mazda to the inside does what the yellow RX-7 couldn't quite do. Gets to the inside, but crucially doesn't outdo the braking, doesn't overshoot on the exit. There's no real place for the Evo 6 to go in terms of fighting back, and the Mazda would move up a position. You can see up ahead there are a couple of cars close, but yeah, in general the field relatively spread out. This was the couple of cars up ahead that were close. The Subaru Impreza had made it through the opening chaos very, very well, but was struggling mostly for straight line speed around this circuit. Decent corner speed from the 22B, but was being absolutely monstered down the straights. As he manages to get out of that final corner with the position, the Supra was just simply too fast. The Civic, one of the very few front-wheel drive cars in this race, was doing a remarkably good job. A-Class is very high for front-wheel drive cars in terms of sort of PI and generally in terms of power and so on. A-Class is pretty demanding for front-wheel drive cars, but the Civic was doing a very, very good job of keeping pace. Both the Toyota and Subaru managing to outbrake themselves into the first corner. They got away with it though, the Civic not quite close enough to punish the pair of them. The Subaru, would keep decent pace through these corners here. It's got the handling to try and fight with these cars, but as soon as we get to any of the even medium length straights, the Subaru would be coming under increasing pressure. I was continuing to make progress through the field. Me, the Skyline and RX-7 would sort of stick together, making our way, or carving our way back up through the field. Came up against an NSX, and while I did have a nice little bit of a comfort margin to that Skyline, as soon as I get trapped up behind the Honda, it's almost immediately gone. I take a slightly wonky line, and that can cost you a surprising amount of time. The NSX tries to go defensive from me. The Skyline then also tries to get a cutback on the orange Nissan. Doesn't quite work out. In the end, it means that the NSX can keep hold of his position, but it's only for a little while. Slightly too much speed, slightly across the curb on the run up the hill, and that would put him onto the horrible sticky sand stuff that would cause me, the Skyline, the RX-7, all have to try and take some frantic avoiding action. Once more, the Mazda is having a go up the inside of that Nissan, this time able to do it a little bit cleaner, but they run through the next corner, get a little bit connected, and still the Skyline would keep hold of the position. Towards the front of the race, and things were quite a lot less exciting, a lot less eventful, perhaps is a better way of putting things. At the front, the NSX was running around a little bit quicker than just about everybody, and fairly safe from any threat. This was second and third. The 300ZX close to the MX-5, but not quite ever really close enough to make a pass until the MX-5 would later make a mistake and end up dropping behind. There's just, it wasn't a huge amount going on. I got slightly lag cannoned into one of the corners, amazingly not breaking my Nissan, but it briefly dropped me to the back of this group. This was the fight for around 7th or 8th place on the track. Celica, 22B, my 300ZX, and the Skyline all fighting for position, going in 2x2s into this particular corner. Me having to try and go the long way around the Celica. I would just about make the place work, have the Nissan as wide as possible through the mid-corner there, so the Celica wasn't quite able to fight back. I did have to go defensive though. The Celica had some serious straight line speed about as we head down into this very, very long hairpin, so you had to keep my wits about me in this one. The Subaru was busy fighting with the Skyline, but kind of let the pair of us escape away a little bit at the front here as we run at the top of the hill. The NSX had caught up and then fell off into the sand at exactly the same place once more. I didn't go defensive. I didn't realise just quite how close the Celica was. I would probably be a little bit better off had I been slightly more aware just how fast the Celica was, really keeping pace with me. In the end, it didn't matter at that particular moment in time. It wasn't quite brave enough to have a big dive. But again, I wasn't going particularly defensive in the Nissan. I wasn't thinking the Celica had that straight line speed, but he did continue to put pressure on the Nissan as I got a big slide, ate too much curb on the inside of that tight chicane, and it was a big slide for my 300ZX. The Celica tries around the outside of the final turn. That's a long way to go around the outside. Can be done, but it's very, very difficult. You have to have a huge amount more grip than the car that you are racing with. And fairly evenly matched in terms of straight line speed down towards turn 1. The Celica, again, having to try and be brave around the outside, does get the car stopped. I thought for sure he was going straight on in the braking zone there. He did a great job of getting it stopped. I'm fighting back on the exit. It's my turn to have to try and go the long way around. Turn 2 doesn't quite work out. I'm going to dive up the inside, though, into turn 3. I've got the grip in the Nissan to get the cutback, get myself to the inside. We've brought the Skyline back into the fight here as we run through the next corner. It is the Skyline's turn to try and find our way past very, very sideways Subaru in the background, just starting to fall off the tail end of this group. The Skyline able to hold it on the outside, has the straight line speed to get himself up the inside for that corner. The Celica then ends up with a wheel on the grass, runs wide, and just loses that little bit of touch to the group. And Skyline certainly helped me out in that fight. Occupied the Celica for a little while, allowed me to get away. Up at the front though, and it would be an NSX that would go on to take victory. It was a fairly sizable margin of victory at this one. We didn't have any real close races for first place in this first group. We had a lot of close races for other positions. It's quite good fun for other positions. At the front though, it tended to be a very lonely affair. The NSX got to the lead on that opening lap and was just massively fast around here. The rest of us not quite able to keep up. I was really happy though with my 300ZX, a car that I've never really built to this class before, not really used a huge amount of, and it was a very, very quick vehicle. I got a little bit unlucky in some of the races. I made a mistake at Nürburgring that dropped some of us back. I had issues with curbs at Sonoma. When it ran well at Road Atlanta, it was a nice track for the Nissan. It was absurdly fast, so maybe not quite replacing my Miura as my favourite A-Class car, but it's certainly up there as one of the better ones that I built. A little bit more oversteery than my normal cars, but was proving to be a very, very quick vehicle. That, though, is going to be it for this week's Versus the Community. The next one is going to be held on Thursday, the 27th of April. We are going to be on Forza Horizon 3. Going to play some playground games using A-Class barn find cars. So, yeah, they're going to be old, very light, and probably have a crazy amount of power. So, should be entertaining. Much will fall over and that sort of thing. That's going to be it from me, though. Thank you very much for watching. Oh, if you want to sign up for that, you can, of course, via our forums. Link in the description. Find the FailRace versus community. Yeah, thank you for watching, everyone. And until next time, goodbye.